What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode. Now, as I mentioned in a previous episode, I have a batch of great interview guests, and I'm going to be sharing them every Wednesday for the next while as part of my new format. And today's guest is Logan Swanson, who is from the US and is going to talk to us about off-grid land investment. This is a sector that has been quite lucrative for Logan, and it's a part of the market that is significant, that has afforded him a significant upgrade in his lifestyle from the grind of paycheck to paycheck to becoming a successful investor. And I'm sure a lot of you guys will understand the paycheck to paycheck lifestyle and like to get out of it. So some great insights from Logan today. Now, for those of you thinking that off-grid land may not be all that relevant to where they are on their journey as an investor, I would urge you to continue listening carefully, because Logan is going to share some of his insights on creative financing. And creative financing, this is an area you can never have enough of. It doesn't matter what sector of the market you're in. Ideas on how to be able to twist it slightly, change it, tweak it ever so much, so that you're able to figure out a way to do the deal. And as you will have heard me talking about resilience and tenacity and all these kind of things, this is part of it: being creative, being resourceful, and figuring out ways to get the deal over the line. So guys, without further ado, I bring you Logan Swanson. Logan Swanson, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gavin.
Logan, you have a podcast of your own, which we'll talk about at some stage, but I just thought, as is always the case, we podcasters always like to introduce our guests or get them to kind of give a little brief intro to the audience. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah, perfect. I'll give you the quick rundown. I started, I guess before I got into real estate at all, I was working in construction, in restaurants, things of that nature. I had 3 kids. And I was kind of in that place where I was looking at myself in the mirror and saying, hey, I don't really have the ability to spend time with my kids. I'm working nonstop, and I'm not even really saving money. We were still paycheck to paycheck. And I got interested in real estate. People said, hey, that's where you get rich, right? You get into real estate somewhere. And I was just flummoxed. I didn't know how to get started. They're like, go buy a house. I'm like, well, I can hardly afford my house. So how am I going to go get another house? And then hopefully arbitrage, make $100 a month or $200. It just didn't make any sense to me. So kind of like you'd heard from Brent Bowers a few weeks ago, I learned about land investing, buying and selling vacant land. The most basic and affordable option is out in the middle of nowhere. We call them desert squares, literally 5-10 acre tracts that you can hardly get to if you try. And I did it, and it worked. I was really shocked. I was able to go procure a $2,000 zero-interest loan from a family friend. And within a year, we had flipped that multiple times, buying 70, 80 acre lots to $80 acre lots and flipping them for $200-$300 an acre. And really having a lot of success in a short period of time. That was about 6 years ago. We started in 2018. And a lot of that success, I think, was due to the pandemic and a very limited amount of competition in our industry. We were sending direct mail campaigns. People were getting the first piece of mail to buy their land in ever. They'd be like, I've owned this for 30 years. No one's ever asked to buy it. So it was a clean sweep, man. We were just kind of scooping them up and selling them real fast. And it went great. And then, things started to cool off in the land market. More competition got brought in. And we learned over the years to just sort of develop and hone our skills and broaden our approach. So now we do not only flipping land, but developing land where we'll buy and subdivide or, do some level of improvement on it. We call those forced appreciation strategies. We do funding where we can invest our money into other people's projects to flip or develop. And then we've also generated, a good note portfolio, so we have that sort of passive income, hitting the account every month. And now we're just sort of looking towards the next big step for us, which I think is probably going to be going vertical. doing our first builds, or maybe doing like a 5-home subdivision, something like that. But right now we've effectively just been doing land over the past 6 years, and it's been an incredible journey. Now we're self-employed. We have been for the past 3-4 years now, and it's a lot of freedom. It's amazing.
That's what it's all about, freedom.
Yeah.
And tell me, Logan, just for people listening that are kind of thinking, geez, I'd like to know more, because so many people will identify that moment that you're talking about where you're living paycheck to paycheck. And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, how can you save up the money in the first instance, to kind of get on the ladder, we'll say. And so what did that first, how did you first of all come across the idea? Like, where do you find a piece of land in the middle of nowhere? And how do you know that you're not overpaying for it?
Yeah, so these are pretty fundamental in the land space, but it's not hard really at all. Like, I have a map of Texas right next to me. I could effectively throw a dart at it and hit a giant county. Most of these are very big counties here in Texas, and it's like this all over the U.S. And you just Google, you go to the website, GIS map for whatever, Brewster County, Texas, and it'll bring you up a map, and you can start clicking around to see property records and landowners and the acreage and things of that nature. And that's how we started. We would just click around, find properties that we thought we might want to buy, and that's exactly what we do now. It's a little more systematized in how we do it, but we found that that's still just the best data, so you can go get the best records straight from the county, right off the GIS map. And then as far as comping goes, you just pull up Zillow, Redfin, Lands.com, any of the sort of standard listing websites. Some areas you have more access or transparency in data, others not so much. Here in Texas, for example, there's no public record of what land is sold for. So you're kind of guessing a little bit when you first start, but there's some good rules that you can operate under. If you see something listed, so say you're working in an area and you see 10 relatively similar listings, say they're all 5 to 10 acre lots, with similar road access, they're flat, they have the same utilities, etc.
That's your comp, yeah.
Yeah, and then you usually use a multiplier. So if those are all listed at roughly the same price point per acre, I usually multiply it by 80% or 75% to determine what is not really a retail value, but like a will sell fast retail value. How can I list it, undercut every other single listing, and get mine sold before anyone else's? And that's really what I'm shooting for if I'm trying to do like a quick cash flip.
Got it. And so when you say you've systemized your process a bit more, so you've taken the dart out of the decision-making process, I presume.
Yeah, well, it depends on how you look at it. I'm still a big fan of darts, but really I've just bought into the darts I threw about 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
So a lot of the areas that we work are just the same areas. That's kind of the benefit of
you get to know a place.
Yes, exactly. So I think the biggest issue in most, this is land specific, but I'm sure it exists in a lot of different types of real estate, but if you don't settle into a specific market or a few specific markets that you know very well and have a lot of success in, then it makes repeatability and growth very difficult. I learned this kind of my second year of investing. We had so much initial success, I thought like, oh, I'm a genius. I've really cracked the... It's not. I was very lucky. It's just the time I entered. But I said, hey, let's go buy land all over the place. And we bought land in, I think, 16 states in 1 year. And boy, that was a headache. And it's still an existing headache. We are still reselling some of those properties right now. But when you're working in a single market or a small market, you can use the same title company, the same surveyor, the same broker, the same title. Everything is just sort of duplicable.
Yes.
And then also your buyer's list. So the people that you're marketing to, you can build over and over again. So you're marketing to the same people when you do acquire a property. So it makes the disposition cycle much quicker.
And if somebody was disappointed on a previous purchase, you can go back to them and say, listen, I know you were disappointed on that one. We have another one that's perfect for you, and all that kind of thing. Yeah,
exactly. And then especially when it comes to comps, like your last question, how do you know what something's worth? Well, you know if you've sold land in the area over and over again. Yeah. And that's, again, kind of allows you to be very competitive. When you aren't familiar with an area, you have to be conservative on your acquisition price. If you're very familiar with an area, you can be a little more forward with your acquisition price because you are much more confident not only at what it'll sell for, but at what speed it will sell.
And whether or not there was one or two buyers or whatever, or bidders, yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that's really the biggest jujitsu move, is just get some gray hairs, stay in the industry long enough, stay in an area long enough to become an expert there.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for it, all right, for sure. And tell me this, you mentioned that it's kind of cooled a little bit. Obviously COVID, people were all talking about buying, away from the city and having kind of the freedom of location because they can go and dial in remotely and things like that. I can see that being attractive, but presumably when you're buying land that's kind of off the grid, is it easy to get access to, the utilities and things like broadband? What's it like in terms of connectivity?
Yeah, so we operate with a lot of different property types, but yes, in the recreational area where you are kind of out in the sticks, utilities, you're not going to have them. And that's kind of the benefit, right? It's like you don't really want...
you don't want cell reception.
You would say that, but... So one of the big benefits right now is Starlink. You can get high-speed internet pretty much anywhere. That is the big issue. So if people are asking about that and you're selling them a recreational property, boom, there you go. You go get Starlink. There's solutions for everything else that pre-exist and have existed for a long time. Like if you need to tote water in, they have big water totes. If you need whatever. Pretty much everything else can be attended to on a recreational property. And even down to like all the science behind building off-grid homes, which we've sold properties that folks have gone and built like really off-grid homes. Like it's not connected to nothing. And they love it. There's a lot of really unique and cool solutions out there for doing all of that stuff. It's really fun to really kind of
you could build a one-off house that's kind of, 100 miles from the nearest town and really, you've got solar panels or something like that in order to fire it up. Interesting. And when you talk about recreational, like for some of our audience in different parts of the world, they may be wondering, what do you mean? Are you talking about for shooting or hunting, or what do you mean by recreational?
Yeah, it's for really any activity that plays to your inner child out in the middle of nowhere, right? So that could
monster
be
trucks.
Hunting. Yeah, hunting. Well, yeah, ATVs, dirt bikes, hunting, fishing, camping. Climbing. Like I have this kind of steep 5-acre property in Colorado that I'm selling right now. It's almost mountainous, kind of rocky, cliffy. And I had people interested in buying that just to go climb. Like, I have my own dedicated climbing spot. I can make a base camp at the bottom. And so, yeah, anything that's fun, outdoorsy. I'm trying to think. Photography. I've had people interested just for photography. Bow hunting, like setting up a bow archery course. Any of those things. So yeah, go have fun in the middle of nowhere. That's what recreation is.
And is there an average size that you buy into, or is that completely random? What would people be looking for? Is it 10 acres or 100 acres, or what's the kind of land size?
Yeah, so it really comes down to any property is going to have a buyer. Okay, but you need to identify who that buyer is and what their needs are. So I could go buy a 5-acre property in Colorado and market it as a hunting property, but no one can effectively hunt a 5-acre property. So I'm not really marketing it to my ideal buyer.
Yeah.
So, if you're trying to sell a property and it's a hunting property, you're going to need hundreds of acres to really make it worth it. But a lot of land that we're selling is really more of a launching point for other activities. So you would say it's like access to, if you're buying a 5-acre parcel and it's near big state parks or big federal parks where you can go hunting or you can go camp or you can do all these other cool things, well, maybe somebody who's coming in from New York will fly in, stay on their 5-acre property, and then sort of have access to all these other activities out there. So as far as specific size is concerned, there's no hard or fast rule. It's always like, okay, who is the ultimate buyer for this property? Do they exist? Am I able to market to them directly? And you'll probably make a sale, especially if you're willing to be flexible with owner financing and some of those things you talked about with Brent a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. In terms of financing, I mean, when people are talking about financing stuff, a lot of the time, what makes a deal doable or not is whether there's an income stream. And obviously, if you're buying a property and you're renting it out, you've got the income to come in to fund your interest. In the case of raw land, obviously, that's a different story. So is it really just down to a person's ability to make payments, and if they miss one, you can step in and take back the land? Or how do you do your financing deals?
Yeah, so if I'm selling on finance, yeah, so I guess the sort of the overarching question here is land is a different asset, right? If you're looking at a rental home, you can have sort of what I don't know if anything's passive. I don't even like that word. That passive stream of income.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day with land, you sell it. You know, if everybody makes their payments the way they ought to, then you're deeding it over and you're back in the market trying to go find something new. So there's no like long-term passive income stream, or I should say permanent. It can be long-term. Unless you get really creative, and I'll go into that here in a minute. But as far as like, okay, I own a piece of land and I am trying to sell it in today's market, which is kind of slow. Yeah, a lot of people expect me to finance it to them. There are, in America, very specific methods for this, and I'm sure it's different in terms of the legal structure all over the world. But in the U.S., depending on price point, I'll operate on what's just called a land contract and a promissory note, which means, hey, you pay me this amount every month with a detailed default procedure in case you stop making payments. If you stop making payments, I keep the land. I just go resell it. It's very similar to like car dealers who sell their cars, tote the note, is what they call it in the U.S., where they're financing their own cars. But if you make all the payments, once they're all paid, I deed you the property. Very simple. Now, there is a way to make sort of lifetime money on land, and it is much more technical, but it is extremely valuable. So this is something that we're pursuing this year more in earnest. We tried last year, and we weren't really quite able to put it together. But land leasing is a very profitable opportunity here in the United States. Now, when people think of land leases, I think oftentimes they imagine like an agrarian lease where, say, I own a field somewhere and some farmer leases it from me. You can make some money doing that. You're not going to get rich, as far as I know, unless you own wide swaths of very valuable farmland. But more realistic, you can go buy commercial property that's at major intersections or near major intersections, or more ideally sort of in the path of where the next major intersections are going to be. Yeah. And you can hold that very affordably. You can have some farmer grow hay on it and effectively hold it for no cost until the path of growth starts catching up. And when that happens, in lieu of selling it to someone to subdivide, you sort of entitle a plan around it. Maybe this section is for a gas station. Maybe there's some public storage in the back there. And then there's enough room for, say, 1, 2, or 3 pad sites in the front where someone might put a Taco Bell or a Starbucks or some sort of restaurant. And you can write absurd land leases, which equate to a triple net, right? It's like you are responsible for nothing. The person that's leasing is responsible for everything. And it's not uncommon to write those for 20, 30, even up to 99 years to certain entities where you're doing that as passive as it gets, right? These folks are just throwing you money. They come in, they build the building, they do the infrastructure, and it's your land.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, it's basically long leasehold interest. And we've, believe it or not, I've actually bought properties that have 999-year leases on them. And the person who gave the lease originally might have died 120 years ago. And you're still in the middle of this thing, and it has 700 years to run or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the... one of the things that we've always been concerned about is, okay, what happens, like we're attempting to build wealth, right? And the goal for building wealth is to hand it to the next generation. Well, I have bought enough land from people to know that you can actually burden your children with land if they don't really know what to do with it or how to sell it or whatever. Yeah. But if you're handing them active leases that will run for half of their life, that is extremely valuable. You know, so if I manage to sculpt, one land lease each year until I die, my family is set for generations, if I've done it effectively.
Yeah.
So that's kind of unsung and not really well mapped as far as in my world. Maybe somebody out there's done it and I don't know how, but I've been trying to sort of invent how I could make that a repeatable structure in our area.
And tell me this, you mentioned earlier that there's some very creative ways. Is that what you mean when you talk about very creative?
Yeah, especially when you try to do it without actually putting money into it. One way to do that is go get a commercial property, like I'm saying, under contract somewhere. It is very common in the United States, and I don't know if it's like this elsewhere, but you don't just get that under contract and go buy, say, a big commercial property like that next week. Typically there's like a 3 to 6 month
process
term, yes, where you're going to go through and get your approvals done. You're going to go through entitlements before you finally close on that property to make sure that your vision for the property is going to be acceptable to whatever the local municipality is with governing authority. So that is what we call like a paper development in our industry, where you can go and actually add a ton of value to a property just by getting it through the entitlement process and then listing it. So one goal of mine is to go find one of these intersection corners, like a 4 or 5 acre lot on an intersection corner that I think is going to be a big deal someday, and go through and do the entitlements on it. So here's where the gas station is going to be. Here's where the public storage is going to be. Get all that drafted up with a civil engineer, put it in the packet, send it to the city, whatever,
municipality,
whatever entity, exactly. Get it approved, and then bring it to market. And I would sell off the gas station pad. I would sell off the public storage pad. I'd sell off maybe 2 of the pad sites that are going to be future leases for somebody, and then I'm just going to keep one. And ideally, my efforts will make it so that in that 6-month period, yes, I'll probably have to put some capital up to do the surveying and the entitlement work and things like that, but I should be reimbursed, and ideally with a little profit after the entitlement work's done, and then I can walk away with my real prize, which is one leasable property. That's one of my goals, and if I can make that system work, I'm going to try to do at least one of those a year.
Yeah, I've seen this done in operation, and in this country where I'm based, what I've seen done before is that you buy agricultural land, and we'll say that's the cheapest land is the agricultural land, and you might be buying at a few thousand per acre or something like that. And what we would do then is open up the county development plan or the local town area plan. And they have these every 8 years or so, they come up with a plan for the development of the future. And you can see sometimes they'll have roads that are planned for, we'll say, it to be built in the next decade or 2 decades. And they'll have just dotted lines saying this is the line of the new road that we will eventually put in.
Yeah.
And so you can theoretically, if you're in the right place, and if you're not unlucky enough that they decide to change the path to a different location, you can buy something and just rent it to a farmer and have that farmer paying you for years. And then when the road is suddenly built and then the land gets rezoned, because now you actually have a road and you have services coming off the road, whether it's electricity, water, sewage connection. And you can be looking at a 10x or a 50x kind of increase in value. And so it is definitely worth doing. It's just, do you have you can't be in a rush for this kind of thing. It has to be something that you kind of park it away, the way Warren Buffett would buy stocks in a company.
Yes, exactly. And it's funny, I live here in Dallas, Texas, and I've had the luck to go meet, so we were talking about going to the county maps earlier and looking at land ownership. And one thing that I noticed, because I grew up in a trailer park in the middle of rural Wisconsin, so I have no understanding of wealth or people that owned a lot of things. It was just completely foreign to me. So I was shook when I started looking at county maps and seeing one family owns half of this county. What is going on here? And a couple years back, I was here we call it bird dogging. I was trying to go find deals for a developer that was way past me, but trying to earn some value and get connected with him. So I went to this county where he said, hey, I need land in this county for my next development. And I started calling and meeting all the landowners out there. And I it's kind of funny. Anyways, one of the things that I was bribing my way in is I like smoking brisket meat. It's a big thing here in Texas. So I would cook up brisket, and then I'd call these old Texans that own a ton of land and be like, "Hey, if you have lunch with me or if you meet with me, I'll bring you a pound of my brisket." And they would always say yes. So I had some really interesting sit downs with like really wealthy landowners in the area. And that is exactly what they were, not in a rush for anything. So we would show up and I'd be like, "We're cash buyers. We have money. We're ready to close." And they would just throw out exactly what they're willing to sell it for. And we'd be like, we'd try to negotiate with them and they just didn't care. They'd say, "No, we know exactly what this is worth and when it's going to, you pay this now or somebody else pays it in a year or two or whatever. There's no rush." And as far as like predictably finding where properties are going to appreciate, if you're in the right market, like Dallas-Fort Worth is kind of an insane market in how quickly it's growing. You're not guessing. You kind of know. Everywhere there's a major road running off in the distance, it's going to grow along that road. That's the path of growth in this area. Yeah. So as long as you get familiar with the market, the path of growth is relatively predictable unless there's some sort of violent phenomena that occurs. So buy along the path of growth. And if you're, that's kind of what we call land banking in our industry. If you're smart, that's the sort of land that you're going to buy. And it's not going to double in value overnight, but 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, you're going to be able to sell that for a good amount of money if you're doing, a little bit of homework up front.
And tell me this, do you ever have difficulty with the land? I mean, in terms of somebody moving onto your land and squatting on it or anything like that? I'm sure stuff like that can happen. Yeah, it happens, especially in these recreational lots that are kind of out in the middle of nowhere. We've had it happen multiple times, and the worst is they kind of know what they're doing. I think this is very similar to what happens in like rental homes, where someone will just come in and squat. I guess this happens a lot in Georgia or areas where they have very renter-friendly laws. But people will like owner finance land with us, and it's very clear, like, you can't live on the land, you can't build on the land, any improvements have to be approved, we have to approve it. But as soon as they sign that contract and give us a couple $100, they'll go roll out there with their RV and stop paying us. And I guess it's only happened twice, and neither time did it end up being a huge headache. We called a sheriff one time and they got spooked and left some trash. We had to clean it up. And then we have one person right now that I know purchased a property from us about 6 or 7 months ago, and they know they're not supposed to live on it. They know they're not supposed to move on it. They don't own the land, so I don't know how they could start getting permits and things, but they can. And they missed a couple payments, so I sent somebody out there to go look at the property, and sure enough, they had cleared it. They have a mobile home on it. They've done all sorts of stuff. So if they default, it puts them in an uncomfortable position, because I could technically come off of get everything, all the improvements that they've done. Yeah. But for me, it's just, I don't want to do that to somebody. I don't want to kick someone off their land that they're living on. So it's just really, really uncomfortable and unfortunate when it does happen. But luckily, fingers crossed, it's never been a crisis for us. I have heard nightmare stories, but we have not had to deal with anything terrible directly. Other than we bought a property we didn't know had used to be a gas station, so it had underground storage tanks on it. That was kind of a nightmare, but nothing too bad. All of it was pretty easily dealt with. You just have to be creative, And Logan, we were talking about the fact that there's been a bit more competition, and obviously you and Brent coming on a podcast like this and talking about how great land is, you're kind of inviting competition in some respect. Can you just tell us, what are your longer term, what's the future look like for your business? What are you trying to achieve, in terms of a runway into the distance?
Yeah, so I would say there's a lot more competition in one specific aspect of land investing, which is flipping, which is, people trying to get rich overnight. I'm going to go send out some mailers, acquire land, sell it for 20 times what and there's a lot of people out there that have education, some courses around it that are trying to motivate that sort of activity. But really that's only one way to invest in land. We kind of already talked about land banking, kind of just buying something, maybe even close to retail and holding on to it for a while. But there's also a lot of opportunities. We fund land deals, so I'm no longer very active in acquiring land, like doing that sort of mail over and over again system. we'll go back to the counties that we know when we feel like we have bandwidth to. But a lot of times people are just bringing us deals that they want us to fund or help them develop, etc. And in that arena, it's actually the opposite. We have more deals than we have funding for. So, one opportunity would be people can open their own funding companies and help make a lot of these projects successful, or work with someone like us. Say somebody had a lot of capital and they wanted to deploy it, but they don't know enough about the industry or know enough about underwriting to know how to do it successfully. Sure. They could talk to us and we could assist them in doing it. But the other options there's a lot of them out there. One thing that I think is really, there's very little competition in our sector, which is kind of causing some people to feast where maybe they shouldn't be feasting. But we in the land space generate a lot of notes. So people that are buying land on a note, this note is secured by the asset, the land itself. So
you're talking about a loan note or a promissory note?
Yes, promissory notes. But these are often structured a little more formally, like the land contract that we use very often for properties under $50,000. It's not the most secure thing. I don't suggest an investor coming in and trying to buy those. You can. It's just much more speculative. But a better option would be, you can do what's called in the States a deed of trust. So somebody can, go close at a title company, go through the formal process of purchasing a property, getting their name on the deed, and then the title company will issue a very official note that is saleable, that has title insurance on it already. And usually people are adding interest in my industry of 10 to 12% is pretty standard on a land contract or a land note that we're originating. But because of the nature of our industry, it's cash intensive. So most of the time that a land investor is originating a note, they would rather sell that note at a discount to someone else to get the cash fusion back into their business to go do the next deal. Right. So there is a glut of notes in our industry that you could buy and make very generous returns on if you knew enough to underwrite, or you knew who to partner with to underwrite something like that. And that's where I'm like, I need more competition. I need people who can come in, understand how to build a note portfolio, understand maybe evaluating land a little bit, doing a little bit of due diligence there, then buying these notes, one, so that there's a little more competition and I could sell a note and actually make a little bit more money. That's a selfish benefit to us. But also it's just really undervalued. People could go and successfully invest in notes alone. So just to make great returns. For
the guys that are listening that maybe are a little confused by this, what we're talking about here is buying the promissory note, which is just a piece of paper, but the piece of paper has on it the obligation of somebody to pay you every month, we'll say interest payments. And if they miss an interest payment, that gives you as the note holder the ability to go in and step in and take the land off of them, essentially. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. And, the benefit to that, especially if you're working with certain land sellers like myself, oftentimes we'll write into the agreement that we will resell that land for you in the case there is a default. Right. So it's a very good business. And it's not really, I would say, scary or unsafe. I think it's very well secured as long as you know how to evaluate and comp a property.
Yeah, as long as you're not overpaying for the property, then the note should always be worth less than the market value of the land.
Right. And then there's just, you make sure that whoever originated the note did some level of due diligence to make sure that the buyer can afford the note, that they've collected enough down, that buyer is fully invested in the property. And typically they run very smoothly. There are some red flags, like maybe somebody put $1 down, and their note is that's not a safe note, right? But if someone
did 20% down, as we called them in 2008, the dinky loans, the double income, no kids.
Yes, exactly.
And then the what is it? There was different acronyms for people who had no job, no income, no prospects, and yet they still went out and borrowed tons of money.
Yeah, and if you're talking about recreational lots, like that is a lot of our buyers on the recreational lots, especially since some people try to I don't know, it's kind of sad. Like home affordability has gotten so bad in the U.S. that a lot of people are looking at what's supposed to be like a vacation or a recreational property, and they're like, if I could just go live in an RV out there and stop paying, $1,500 a month for a single bedroom apartment, it's worth it. So a lot of people are looking at our recreational properties and thinking like, hey, maybe this is my card out of the rat race.
Yeah.
And I can still do my digital work because I have SpaceX. Like, you can go in the mountains of Colorado and still do a 9 to 5. Remotely.
Yeah. It's interesting. Tell us, Logan, in terms of, you mentioned that you were struggling financially when you started this business, and you started to make some money and it started to work for you and stuff. How much would you say your mindset has changed since you started this process?
Oh man, it's day and night. It started changing right before I got into real estate, when I was doing sales for a construction company. And it was really my first commission-only job. And I realized, like, oh, this world does not operate the way I thought it did. When you're in that hourly or salary mentality, you just kind of assume that is actually the structure or the framework upon which the bigger economy rests. And it's not. This whole economy is built around handshakes and deals, and you do this, I'll do this, you make this, I make that. It's really so much less, I don't know, secure than I thought it was. I don't know. I just thought it was very structured, and it's not as structured as I thought.
Yeah.
But I remember I had a good month in my sales job, and I made a $10,000 check. And I was like, I never thought that I would receive a $10,000 check. I didn't know what to do. I was sitting here holding it, looking at it like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So there was that mind shift. I was like, oh, instead of working 50 hours for somebody, I could apply myself, intensely but creatively, and actually double or triple my income through that process. So when I got into real estate, I had been grinding, and especially if you're working in restaurants or like, you're working 60 hours a week at the beck and call of whoever happens to be in front of you at the time. It's just kind of a nightmarish job in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I realized, like, if I just took half that effort and applied it into my own business, like, I would be fine. And that's kind of how it ended up working out. Now, granted, like I said, we entered the industry in a very lucky time, but it's because of our effort that, we are in what some might call a downtime. Now, I think it's about to trend up because the election's over, and we're already seeing a lot of that right now. But
yeah,
that's how we survived. It's like, oh, we just work harder, and we know exactly what we don't want to go back to. So it really does. It's like this phase shift where all of a sudden you feel a lot more in control of your life. But even then, now that I've seen enough deals fall apart at the last moments and things like that, I've actually learned much more of, like, I have to be so zen. I just kind of have to be detached from success or failure, or don't even frame it that way. These are just things that are happening around me, and sometimes they result in more money, and sometimes they result in more headache or confusion. And so
nothing. It's funny. I've just returned from Dubai, and I was at a conference over there, and it's amazing how the way the mind works is. I was listening to this athlete who, he was actually a CrossFit athlete, and he started a gym business, and he started this business a couple of years ago before Alex Hormozi had the big success that he had. And he was explaining how he was doing really well in his business. He was pulling in something like $50,000 a month in his business. And then he met Alex Hormozi, and Alex was saying, how much are you earning per month? And this is before Alex was the big, huge sort of star that he is now. But he was like, I'm doing $50,000 a month, And Alex was like, oh, that's nice. That's really cute,
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, wow, how much are you making? And he was making something like $2 million a month.
Yeah.
And when he heard that, he was just, oh my God, I had no idea that was even possible. And he said within 4 weeks of that conversation, his business had gone from $50,000 a month to $200,000 a month. And it's incredible how somebody just like this conversation we're having now could unlock something that's mentally holding somebody back, just where they kind of go, I didn't even know that this land stuff was possible. Mm-hmm. And now my mind has been opened that this is a possibility. And now all of a sudden they're going to be out there looking at what's possible. So it's
it really is incredible. And you would think once you explained your story and your success, or not even success, like I don't even say it, like whatever, just my phase shift, my mind shift. that it would then evoke the same thing from somebody else. And it doesn't necessarily, because I thought, like, I come from a big family. We weren't we were pretty poor growing up. So my thought was like, okay, I'm going to go figure this real estate thing out, and then I'm going to bring it back to my family, and I'm going to show my brothers how to start and take care of their family and all this sort of stuff. And they didn't seem interested at all. I guess one brother did. He did a little bit.
There's that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And it's amazing. You could come and sort of say, listen, this is how to make money. And people would just like, yeah, not interested. It's interesting.
Yeah, and that's kind of frustrated me too, because I have occasionally I'll do one-off sort of like coaching, like I'll guide someone through setting up a land business. And I would always just be so confused at the lack of like excitement and motivation. I was like, man, I would have killed to have somebody
explain this to me.
Yes, dude. Yeah. Instead, I'm like, I had to learn every lesson the hard way. I had to lose money here and lose money there. And these folks are just getting, for I think I've charged like a few $1,000. I'm not there to make money, right? And giving them all this insight and my contracts and unlimited access to me to help them. And they would get bored, and kind of disappear. And I just like, it would really confuse me, because I worked so hard to, like, I found someone who was interested in, a family friend who was interested in real estate and had rental homes, and then I had to actively pursue them and sit down with lunch and keep forcing myself in front of them to have lunches to learn, and then I had to dig through all these podcasts, and I had to keep pushing and grinding to finally get enough knowledge to take action. And other people, I'm handing it to them, and they're just...
Do you know what it is, though, Logan? What's interesting, I've seen this before, is that if you try to be, generous and magnanimous and give somebody something for free, they don't value it. And if you turn around and slap a $20,000 price tag on it, they'll be completely listening in so intently. They'll be taking notes and everything. And it's amazing how the exact same thing with a zero price tag on it just devalues in the mind of the person receiving it.
Yeah. And even then, like, I do this thing in my, like, my social media network. There's a bunch of land investors that are all on Facebook and things like that. And once every 2-3 months, I'll go into these Facebook groups and I'll just say, hey, I'm willing to take 10, 15-minute phone calls with anybody, help you solve any aspect of your land business. And maybe I don't know the direct answer, but I'll brainstorm it with you. Like, we'll try to figure it out together. And my phone will light up. I'll have 30, 40, 50 calls in a week where I'm sitting here just trying to help anyone in their business overcome whatever their current obstacle is. And what I always end up hearing is that people have the same exact issues, and it's almost always just like a lack of creativity and effort. And I feel bad saying that to them, but I'm like, they're bringing me completely solvable issues, things that you can completely overcome if you just, like, you mentioned Alex Hormozy, like, he has this routine when he works. He, like, puts in headphones and then headphones over his headphones and turns all the lights out and, like, he just hyper focuses. And I kind of do similar, but it's like very small increments. I'll do that for like 30 minutes or an hour, and then I'm like, honestly, that's kind of like a day for me. But I'll accomplish so much in that time period because I'll really focus and attack my tasks. It's just clear these people aren't doing those things.
Yeah, it's so true. Logan, tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast is the Land Fixer Podcast. And what we do on that podcast, there's a lot of like land flipping podcasts where there's some guru or somebody who's just interviewing land flippers over and over again, and it's good content, but it ends up being redundant for me. So I started a podcast where I feel like I could approach any topic as it relates to land. And it's mostly because it's hard to get me to shut up when I'm interested in a topic. So my wife got sick of me talking to her, so she said, here's a microphone, and that's kind of where a lot of this...
Go record a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, we do a bunch of stuff on my podcast. We're covering, for example, one of our development projects in Tennessee, where we bought 300 acres and we're subdividing it into 27 lots. My partner in that is coming on as a regular guest, and we're just covering every step of it. What are we doing? The headaches, the complications. I've interviewed brokers and agents that specialize in land, people that specialize in acquisitions, myself who specializes in disposition. I'll cover topics about that. I have a podcast episode coming up where we're going to talk to a probate attorney, and we're going to learn about the legal structure around inheritance, because that's a very, very common issue in our industry. Yeah, and if you master that, you can make millions. So it's really like anything that I can relate back to land. I had one on mental health and spirituality as it relates to investing. So yeah, land related anything
that runs the full gamut. And tell us this, Logan. I like to ask my guests, what one piece of advice would you give your 18-year-old self if you had an opportunity?
Community is everything. Go in search of networks. I have never. That's probably the most valuable thing I've ever done. Like when I decided I was going to get into real estate investing, the first thing I did was start a real estate investing group. Even though I knew nothing, I was like, I bet people who do know things will show up.
Yeah,
and then I'll have relationships with them. And that's really served me better than almost anything else in my life was being able to shake hands, look people in the eye, and have genuine conversations.
That's great advice. Great. Logan, I'm conscious of time. Let us talk. If somebody wanted to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way to find you and connect?
Yeah, just go to thelandfixer.com, thelandfixer.com. That'll take you to my website, my podcast, a bunch of stuff there. If you just want to email me directly, say you have a property in the States that you want to do some sort of development or forced appreciation strategy on or whatever. If you think I was interesting enough to talk to, you can reach out to me at thelandfixer@gmail.com. That's landfixer, Fixer, @gmail.com. And I'll be happy to chat.
Brilliant. Well, I'll put links in the show notes below so that people can find that.
Awesome.
Logan, it's been great talking with you and wishing you the best, and have a great day.
Same. Thanks, Gavin.